Sometimes it seems that all you do at the closing is initial here and sign here about 100 times with no opportunity to read or understand anything. I'd like to introduce Jane McNamara, the President and CEO of GreenPath Debt Solutions, a not-for-profit organization that helps people enjoy a better quality of life through financial counseling and also by offering solutions to help individuals and families plan for their future. Jane will talk with you about closing on your new home.
We like to take the mystery and confusion out of closing on a home. We want our clients to feel confident that they understand what responsibilities they're taking on and that they've gotten everything they expect. Some of the questions we often get are, who handles the closing? Who is usually present at the meeting? Should you have an attorney with you? A closing shouldn't take a lot of time, and if everyone is well prepared, there's seldom a reason it won't go smoothly. I've asked some professionals whose principal work is with home buyers to give us some insights into the closing process.
Well, the closing is kind of like the event. It's where everything comes together. It's where everything that you've agreed on, everything that you wanted to happen, now it's going to happen at the closing.
The closing is usually handled at a title company. The buyer and the seller's agent, along with the loan officer, are usually in attendance. If you are buying a brand new home, the builder or a builder's representative will be in attendance. Sometimes an attorney is present for the buyer or the seller, but not always.
Should you have an attorney at closing is an important question. The fact is that an attorney should see the documents in advance of closing, and that would tell him whether or not he needs to be at the closing, because it would highlight any disputes that might arise or any problems with the paperwork. If those disputes do come up, then certainly he should be there to help out.
A closing may not go smoothly because the buyer was not prepared for the amount of money that they need to bring in. They didn't have their homeowner's insurance because the lender does need that policy. They forgot their driver's license, or the buyer just gets cold feet.
Well, people are fearful of closings because there's an overwhelming amount of paperwork involved, and there's a high degree of anxiety among lay people as to what that paperwork contains. If they've been prepared in advance, generally the anxiety level is lower. But in each case, they're about to spend more money in one shot than they've ever spent in their lives.
Of course, you should read and understand everything you sign. Too often, people sign documents without a clear idea of what they mean. You need to know what you are signing, and the best way to find out is to ask questions. Never be afraid to ask what something means. Once you've signed it, it may be too late. Frequently, the closing documents are not completed until just before the closing. And that is not the best time for questions, discussion, or negotiations. Instead, you can ask the closing agent to provide you with a full set of completed documents in advance of the closing. Then you review them with your attorney to ensure that you understand what they say and that they say what you've been told they would say. You can also have a list of questions that need clarification. But remember, closings are fast. Know what you're signing ahead of time, and the closing can be a quick, relaxed experience.
The money needed for the closing is all going to be itemized on your HUD-1 settlement statement. That will be given to you by your loan officer or your agent. The title company provides that to them. The form that you need to bring that money to the title company is going to be a cashier's check. The title company will not accept checks, cash, or a credit card.
Well, I think the most important documents to review before the closing would be your HUD-1 statement, because that shows where the money's going. It shows how much money you need to bring. It shows where all the money's going, who's getting paid, how much they're getting paid, and what all the fees are.
It's important to review all the closing documents and make corrections if necessary.
It's important that you see all the documents in advance because they have to match up with the purchase agreement. The purchase agreement is the blueprint for the whole deal. The documents all flow from the purchase agreement. If you have those in agreement, that's fine. If they're not in agreement, you have to call the person who prepared the documents and make sure that they are right. The bright light for an attorney is title. You have to pass title from the seller to the buyer. That's the entire nature of the transaction. Everything else is peripheral. So we spend a lot of time looking at title work to make sure you're getting that good title.
Another aspect of the closing that I think is perhaps one of the most important things is to make sure that you understand the note. Now, the note describes exactly what your obligations are under the terms of your mortgage. It tells you when your payment is due. It tells you what amount that you need to pay every month. It tells you your interest rate, when the interest rate can change, if it changes. And it really drills down and tells you the details of what it is you're getting yourself into. So from my perspective, the two most important documents to review are the note and the HUD-1 statement.
To be a smart consumer, remember these two words: be careful. Closing agents may handle 6 or 8 closings a day. They're used to the process and generally eager to complete the transaction as quickly as possible. Don't be rushed. Take your time at the closing. Review all documents to be sure they are what you agreed to. For instance, be sure there's no increase in rates over what you were originally quoted. Look for additional loan features that weren't discussed. As I mentioned earlier, never be afraid to ask what something means. Do not feel pressured. After all, it is your money.
We've gotten some very good information about making the closing easy and comfortable. But I want to mention an important difference depending on where in the country you live. Our experts have talked about a face-to-face closing where the buyer, the seller, and the settlement agent meet to exchange money and sign papers. If you live in the eastern part of the U.S., all of this information applies. If you live in the western U.S., the closing process can be quite different. In the West, the closing is done in escrow. That means that everything is handled by an escrow agent. This person has a state license to act as an agent for the buyer and the seller. The agent collects all the required documents from the seller and the lender, and then collects money from the lender and the buyer. After that, the agent prepares the deed and disperses funds to pay off any existing loans plus other closing costs. When all of that's done, the agent delivers the deed and the keys to the buyer. Remember, no matter where you live, if you have any questions or want any documents read by an attorney, it has to be done before the closing date because there's no meeting where these issues can be raised. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.